Interested in what Roger started in.
He's a troublemaker
in the last segment, and I'm interested because you can answer this question. You've been there, you've done that, you've been in politics, and the question I guess I would think about from my standpoint is if you're doing a good job for me as a constituent, how would I feel about how you do the job? I mean, and I'm not necessarily saying should you compromise your morals.
Well, let me ask you this.
Would
you want your elected official to compromise his morals?
I mean, that's a great question. And
see, it's easy to sit on the sideline and talk about the offensive tackle that missed the block.
Right.
Or the defensive lineman who can't get off the block. I mean, that's real easy for us to do. I've always tried to put myself in a very real world position. I'll ask you this question. Because I thought about it during the break. Going back to Roger's point, I think in front of a church, there was a sign that said something about politics and morality. I don't remember the exact quote, but can you have people in politics with lesser morality and expect a moral government? I mean, in essence, that's what they're insinuating or implying. Here's what I'll say. Couple of examples that I can remember very vividly. I was a county council member running for lieutenant governor who desperately did not want to vote on a judicial center because that included a tax increase. I can remember manipulating the process to a point that I got sideways with one of my best political friends and alliances. I mean, he's a dear friend of mine. If I'd call his name, you know exactly who I'm talking about. He's as good a friend as I've got in politics. But he was on one side. He was on the we got to build it now. And I was on the side of I know we got to build it because we've got some directives from the Supreme Court. We had potentially prisoners. A hypothetical scenario in the old complex could have been in the old courthouse. Someone could have horrifically killed your family member. And you have to ride the elevator to the courtroom with the person who was accused of killing your family member. I mean, you're asking for problems when you allow that to be recreated day after day after day. So I knew the necessity, but I didn't want to vote for a tax increase. I didn't want to vote for bigger government because I'm a Republican running for statewide office in a very conservative anti-tax state. So I played games. I played a lot of games that I ain't real proud of. But I'll tell you what we did. We didn't vote till after I ran for lieutenant governor.
And I guess we should note that we just opened the new judicial center.
And it's an amazing facility. And I remember slow walking that. In fact, I slow walked it to the point that the person in the dedication ceremony called me and another person out, maybe not by name, but in generality, saying we would have had this thing 2 years ago if it weren't for a couple of cowboys from the low part of the county who kind of slow walked it. Well, I slow walked it. I don't mind telling you. And I did some very deceitful things in slow walking it. I love the person that was on the other side, but I didn't need to get in harm's way in my political endeavor. I remember one day, my third year on council, somewhere thereabout, and I guess one thing I understood was the budget. I mean, being a business guy, I'd been in, budgets with P&Ls and, revenues and expenditures and all that thing. That was not a foreign language to me. Now, to a lot of elected officials, that's a foreign language, and they know very little of what it implies, what you have to be involved in when you set the budget to understand the county budget. But Rev, I remember one time when interest rates went real south. This would have been in 2008, when the world blew up, interest rates got to 0%. There was a lot of refinancing opportunities we had at the county to save the taxpayer a lot of money. We extended terms on the Civic Center and a couple of other things, but it was all about bettering the deal for the county taxpayer. Well, I mean, that's a very moral thing to do. We're refinancing, sure. We're saving money. Well, out of the saving of the money and through the refinance, there was a windfall. There was a pocket of money that we picked up. And I knew how our county administrator operated. I knew there was a likelihood that he had put the money somewhere. I knew that about 6 or 7 other members of council had no idea about that. I never told them. I knew the money was there, and every now and then when a tennis court needed to be repaired at Hannah-Pamplico High School or a road needed to be fixed in my district, I would refer to that money. It was not my money by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, it belongs to the county taxpayer, but I knew where the money was housed. I knew how that game was played. The moral thing to do would have been to go all of my other council members and said, hey, guys, via all the refinancing of the Civic Center and these other debts we've done, we've ended up with about $850,000 or $900,000 of a windfall. Why don't all of us go equally get a share of that? You get a little bit of that money and do some things you think are very worthwhile in your district. I'll get a little bit of that money and I'll do things that are because we're not going to return it to the taxpayer.
Some people would say the moral thing to do is to return it to the taxpayer.
I don't disagree with that. But I knew there wasn't a chance in Hades of that happening. I knew there was no way in the world that we're going to take that $800,000 and give it back to the taxpayer. Well, my obligation is to who? The people of my district. The moral thing, the ethical thing, the virtuous and righteous thing would have been to go to my other comrades on council and said, hey, guys, there's some money over here. The fair and equitable thing to do is divide this money equally and everybody get a little bit and do things in your district that you deem appropriate and worthwhile. I didn't do that. I kept my mouth shut. And every time I've needed a little bit of help in my district to do something, whether it was fix a road, clean some ditches.
But see, I think that's a good example of what we're talking about. So your constituents that voted for you in your district of the county, well, they benefited in a way because you, and I wouldn't say you compromised your morals, but you.
Well, I mean, but you would agree that the most moral thing to do would have been to tell everybody.
Oh, sure.
Because we're kind of in this thing together. Yeah. We're an elected body of people. But I knew that 5 or 6 of those people had no clue what was going on. I knew there was 1 or 2 others, myself and 1, maybe 2, that kind of kept up with what was going on financially with the county. And you know how I justified it? I justified it by saying, well, we did this big refinance and we saved the taxpayers all this money and we're able to do these improvements at the Civic Center and some other. And we can debate whether these things should be a part of the function of government. I mean, that's a fair debate to be had, but that train had left the station and I was left to deal with the circumstances and situations that were. I never whispered that there was a big pot of money over there. I knew about it, and I knew 1 other person knew about it. And every time that other person needed a little bit of subsidy on something in his district, he would go to that little pot of money. And we went to the pot of money that we were in a council meeting one day, and somebody said, "Where y'all getting this money, man?" I mean, and so the virtuous thing would have been to do, "Hey guys, there's some money over there that we saved as a result of refinancing the Civic Center. Get a little bit and do some things." No, I mean, I was very selfish in that regard. Why? Because I represented a district, and it was my job not to look after the other districts. It was my job to look after my district, and as long as more of that money was still there, there was more opportunity for me to do things in my I didn't sell my soul down the river. I mean, I didn't sell my soul down the river by manipulating, slow walking the judicial center. I didn't sell my soul down the river and allowing that money to sit over there in that safe haven and me pluck bits and pieces of it when I needed things done in my district. But it wasn't the most moral thing to do. It was not the most virtuous thing to do. Let me ask you this. Had you lived in my district, would you have rather me let that money sit there and utilize that money in the district that you reside in? Or would you rather me done the moral and ethical thing and say, hey, guys, there's a bunch of money over here. Let's all of us share in equitable shares?
I think I would have had you do exactly what you did.
Well, and that's the balancing act. You can't sell your soul to the devil. You can't, sell your soul down the river. But when you accept to become a part of the political game, you accept that there's some nuances and some imperfections in there that you better have a stomach for. You just better, or you better not be involved in it. There's a couple of things happened when I was lieutenant governor that I won't go into great detail, but I knew in my heart, head, and mind, body, and soul, it wasn't right. But it really wasn't my business. And I didn't turn a blind eye. I did tell my reading clerk about it, but I told nobody else. And once again, I understand that men are not angels. And it goes back to something I've said on this show many, many times. And I hope you'll understand exactly what I say when I say this. Politicians are just like everybody else, just a little more so. And that's probably the best way I could explain this bent gene dynamic. And I think that's what Roger's asking.
But would you apply, in this case, the church sign in Pamplico to national politics and to the president at this point? You think that's where that was rooted?
No, I would imagine. I mean, a lot of people question this president's morals. I question this president's morals. I mean, of course I do. I don't know that. And then it goes back to something I said in the 6 o'clock hour this morning. When you wonder why Trump is here, when you wonder, okay, there was a group of people in America that drank the Kool-Aid of Donald Trump. There's a group of people in America that believed Trump was the answer. Or was there a group of people who believed Trump was the necessary evil to make all the people that were comfortable uncomfortable? See, I think there's more of that than there. I don't think a lot of people voted for Trump because they thought he was going to go to Washington and fix things. I don't. I think there's a lot of people who voted for Trump thinking Trump would go there and expose certain things. And I got a buddy who believes Trump's a con man. So I said, okay, if Trump's a con man, let's take your notion as fact. If Trump's a con man, who better to expose a con than a con man? I believe the federal government today is a con. I don't believe state government's a con. I don't believe local government's a con. I think local and state government are imperfect people doing a very imperfect job that is challenging. And there's a lot of balls you got to bounce in the air. I respect the job they do. I believe the federal government today is a con. I think it's a complete and total con game at how they allege to represent the interest of the American people when in fact they do not. So when I look at Trump and his election, and I look at the people that voted for Trump, I don't believe if you honestly, sincerely, introspectively question your motivation for voting for Trump, I don't believe but a few percentage of us voted for Trump because we felt he could go there and really fix the things that we perceive to be broken. I do believe a large percentage of people voted for Trump because they wanted somebody to give them hell. They wanted somebody to go to Washington and expose what I'm arguing is a con. And I do believe that, Rev. I do believe that our federal government has gotten to a point that people don't trust it. People believe it's corrupt. More and more people believe it's not serving the interests of the American public. It's all about a select few, the corporatist, the permanent class, the ruling class, the political class, these subsets of people that we talk a lot about on this radio show. You'd be hard-pressed to convince me that a lot of people voted for Trump because they thought he'd go there and just methodically knock down con after con after con.
But he's exposing the con, yet at the same time, unemployment
sure
is down. Look at the foreign policy situation. Look at the Korea. All the while exposing the con, he is actually fixing some things.
And I give him credit for that. I'm happy. I am ecstatic that the economy is improving. I still question how much it's improving. I question inflation, the way we judge and evaluate. I mean, there's a lot of things that I question because, once again, I believe it's a big con game. I believe anything the federal government is involved in is misrepresented. I go into any article or survey or research. I want to know who did it. I want to know where the money came from. When I read the American Enterprise Institute, I understand they have sponsors. When I read the Heritage Foundation, I understand they have sponsors. When I read the Cato Institute or Brookings Institute and their report on this or that or the other, I always have one eye kind of halfway closed because I understand there's an ulterior motive. There's always a reason the data needs to say this or that or the other. But I go back to Trump. And I think if you voted for Trump believing that he would go to Washington and fundamentally in 4 or 8 years change the direction of the country, I think you're going to be sadly mistaken. But I think if you voted for Trump because you believed he would go there and turn over the apple cart and expose things that need to be exposed, we talked last week. Just imagine if she had won. I mean, just close your eyes for a split second and imagine that things went as everybody assumed they would and she won the election. Do you think we would know about Peter Strzok and Lisa Page? Do you think we would know about Jim Comey, Andy McCabe, James Clapper, John Brennan? No, these people would still be kings of the hill. They would still be the forces that guide our government, that manipulate the process. Trump has exposed those people. Has he fixed that? No, of course he has not. But he's exposed these elements of government that I always knew were there. And I always knew they didn't have the best interests of the American people at heart. And Rev, at the end of the day, that's all I want our government to do. I accept the fact that our government is full of people who have different ideas, different perspectives, different values, different religions, different experiences. But I think we all have, or they all have, a primary responsibility to serve the American public.